Okay, so here's the third lecture, if you will, on Yin and Yang, taken from Between Heaven and Earth. This is a completely different approach to Yin and Yang theory. I think that the web that has no weaver makes Yin and Yang easier to start to learn by delineating out those 5 principles. On the other hand, Between Heaven and Earth is really descriptive, and I think it's maybe easier to digest and adapt and embody and absorb the principles of Yin and Yang. So then the real trick is, can you, as students, as processors of information, can you take those descriptive statements in Between Heaven and Earth, which are so beautiful and so flowery, and associate them with the very specific laws given in the web that has no weaver? That would be a really good mental exercise for you to do. One more time, maybe I made a big enough point of this, I'm not sure, but I just want to emphasize that the concept of yang or more than does not mean better, and yin or less than does not mean worse. They're just labels. They're flip sides of the same coin. They represent relationships. They represent characteristics, and there is no value judgment in them. All right, so going forward, I just wanted to pull a few little quotes out of Between Heaven and Earth. Page 49, dialectical logic captures yin and yang thinking. So if you've ever taken a philosophy class or a logic class in college or something like that, you might have heard the word dialectical. If you haven't, you should look it up. It's a very Western kind of word applied to a very Eastern concept. So this is classic Between Heaven and Earth writing. Yin and Yang is a symbolic representation of the universal process that portrays a changing rather than a static picture of reality. There are revolving cycles of the one becoming the other. I think they do well to point out that Yin and Yang can be difficult because although Yin and Yang themselves, black and white, short and tall, talk about polar opposites, which are really clear categories. The fact that you can subdivide those categories, we talked about that with the 5 principles from the web that has no weaver, because you can keep subdividing those categories. Every yin has a further subdivision of yin and yang, and every yang has a further subdivision of yin and yang. You sort of go from having strict either this or that categories and sort of smudge away from having strict either or categories that are fixed and concrete. They make the assertion that yin and yang depend wholly on the point of view of the observer. I don't disagree with that entirely, but I think that Kapchuk does a better job in the web that has no weaver of pointing out that there are some pretty strong conventions about yin and yang. Yang means more than, it means the sunny side of the slope, and it doesn't matter what your point of view is as the observer. Yang is the sunny side of the slope. It's the more than category, and likewise yin is the less than category. Now, that being said, what is yin in one person might be yang in another person. A characteristic, somebody who's a yin body type who spikes a fever will be yang. Well, so the categories can shift and change, but that's not necessarily because of the point of view of the observer. In any case, the ideas of yin and yang are most definitely not Cartesian. Think back to the Taoist symbol of yin and yang and that dynamic curve that suggests flow and change, and I think this is kind of a interesting way to talk about flow and change and the cyclic nature of all things. The dilemma of what came first, the chicken or the egg, is transcended in Chinese philosophy by accepting them as inseparable agents of the process of creation. I love that. I think it's just a great way to talk about yin and yang, and I also think it's a great way for us to sort of get over our Western thinking selves that the chicken and the egg happen together and inseparably. So think about what the categories of yin and yang mean. If yin is rest and decay and interior and downward, and yang is upward and outward, if yang is exercise and exercise creates the yin of the solid body, then they're inseparable. So yin responds to yang's stimulus, and yang is supported by the solidity of yin. I think a great, again, example of that, the idea of a candle. So the beeswax and the wick are the foundations. The candle doesn't exist without the beeswax and the wick. And those would be considered yin. They're solid and they're heavy and they're sort of immutable without the yang of the flame, which moves upward. It's insubstantial, it's bright, it's hot. Their dependence on each other renders them inseparable. To have a lit candle, you have to have a candle and a flame. So that's that chicken and egg thing, that are inseparable in the act of creation. So if yin is a noun, the solid, substantial, heavy thing, yang is a verb. It's the activity and the energy. And this is a little hokey, life is a complete sentence, but yeah, it's a cute little quote anyway. So page 52 in Between Heaven and Earth has a great, just a simple little line drawing with some labels, but I think it's a great representation of the idea of yin and yang. I think it's a great representation of the cyclical nature of everything. So take a good look at it. Those of you who are math buffs might recognize something akin to a sine wave in there. If you remember back to, I guess that would have been high school trigonometry or pre-calculus or something like that. There's a sine wave in there. Those who were doing Qigong with me last week, doing the Four Seasons Qigong, at the end there, you'll see some Four Seasons Qigong in that figure. You'll also see the yin and yang symbol in that figure. I think it's a really neat figure, so study it well. So back to the idea of yin and yang balancing each other and creating each other, and then applying that to the idea of health. Health is defined as the poised balance between yin and yang, and sickness is the result of a deficiency or an excess, otherwise known as a yin or yang disharmony. And I should stop and say that that is one version of what sickness is in Chinese medicine. It is by no means the only version of sickness, of defining sickness in Chinese medicine. Just one version. There are many, many other subtle versions. A few of which we're going to talk about in the coming weeks, but I just wanted to point that out. So sickness is the result of a deficiency or an excess, a yin or yang disharmony. Survival is based on an organism's capacity to adapt to changing conditions and maintain equilibrium. Yin and yang harmony is a metaphor for sustaining adaptability and equilibrium. So adaptability, an organism's ability to adapt to changing conditions, is a measure of health. That's a definition that was given or a description that was given in The Web That Has No Weaver, and I think it's worth emphasizing. The ability to adapt to change is one measure of health. So the next little point, read the section on pages 53 and 54 called Yin and Yang in the Human Body. I'm going to let you handle that on your own. It's, it's interesting. It's definitely worth reading. I don't think it's worth killing yourself over. Although the one thing I would point out on page 54, the last paragraph before it says Qi, moisture, and blood, it mentions, actually, the paragraph above that as well, it mentions yin and yang organs, and I just wanted to point out that the Solid organs, this is an emphasis on the solid organs are the yin organs, and the hollow organs are the yang organs. Just a few more words of wisdom from Harriet Beinfield and Ephraim Korngold. And a little bit more about yin and yang in the body. So a yang body is larger, stronger, more muscular, springier, a greater capacity for food, greater capacity for activity. One of those people who just kind of goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and always seems to be wound up. And they don't seem to need a whole lot of rest. On the other hand, a yin body tends to be paler in color, more slender, softer, dense and compact rather than tense and springy. Big typo here. The be yin should say to be yin, is to enjoy quiet, calm, simple environments, limited capacity for food, work, and interaction. Yin people tend to want to spend a lot of time alone, although, you know, we've all got yin and yang within all of us, so it's not like these are hard and fast categories. They're just sort of broad brushstrokes to help you think about what the meaning of yin and yang is and how that meaning can be applied to the human body. Keep in mind, so in the West, we value that young person, the type A personality with a crazy work ethic, you know, working 80 hours a week. That's not necessarily healthy. I think that we in the West tend to perceive yang as being healthier, but that is not necessarily the case. Eventually, the yang person is going to run out of energy and crash. And the yin person might be the person who just, you know, that slow and steady wins the race kind of thing. The rabbit and the tortoise, or the hare and the tortoise, slow and steady wins the race, might be the yin person. So stop for a minute. Think about yourself. Yin or yang, or both. More yin than yang, more yang than yin. Think about your clients, some individual clients. They're all going to be a mix. Think about who's yin and who's yang, and why. Why do they strike you that way? Sometimes you can just have a, you know, sort of call somebody to mind and they give you a general impression. So what are the specifics about that general impression that make you think somebody is yin or yang? And more to the point, when you get past the surface and you really start to know your clients, think of somebody you've worked with a lot, somebody you know well. Has your perception of whether or not they're yin or yang changed? So page 59 is a nice little chart. I called it a figure in the slide, but it's really just a chart that sort of compares yin and yang in a number of different categories, sort of the overall characteristics, the universal characteristics, then physiological characteristics. A constitution is somebody's general physiological patterns, the sum total of their physiological patterns, and then diagnostic parameters. You certainly don't need to memorize all those things, but it would be good to read through them carefully and sort of do a little compare and contrast exercise in your own mind, if not actually on paper, just to sort of make sure that you can sort of parse out what each of those yin and yang characteristics means and why it's yin or yang.